Hi everybody, welcome to Black Americana. I'm Ashley, and in today's episode we are looking at how Black Americans lost essence. Essence magazine was the dream of four Black American men to celebrate Black women, and indeed they did achieve that dream. Now, before I go any further, let me speak to the integrity of this platform. I never wanted to come across as if I'm being advantageous when another outlet is going through controversy, whether it's a legacy brand as big as Essence or a small channel. However, being that this platform is Black Americana, I felt an obligation to speak up for my people, because some of the discourse going around about Black Americans and our relationship with Essence over its 55 years of existence is simply being misconstrued. We will go over the long history of controversy around Essence, how it's been special to our community, and where things stand today. So if you're ready, keep watching. In the fall of 1968, Black America was at a breaking point. Earlier that year, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy had met brutal demises. Institutions continued to integrate, but issues persisted. Black entrepreneurship has been a vehicle for upward mobility. Russell Goins, an investment banker, invited a group of Black men to dinner to have an informal think tank to explore gaps in the market for Black consumers. None of the men at the dinner knew anyone other than Goins, but they decided to exchange ideas anyway. Jonathan Blount, one of the guests, mentioned that his mother always wondered why there wasn't a women's magazine where she could see herself. He suggested a magazine dedicated to Black women. From that dinner, Ed Lewis, Clarence Smith, Cecil Hollingsworth, and Jonathan Blount set out to start a magazine for Black women. According to Ed Lewis, quote, Essence was started to affirm and inform Black American women who represented an untapped advertising market that none of the other women's service magazines recognized. None of the men had experience in publishing, but they all came from the finance and business worlds. They decided to incorporate as equal partners, with their board of directors being allowed to cast a vote if there was ever a tie. Each man also owned 45,000 shares in stock and would allow Essence employees to obtain shares in the corporation. Although Essence was Black-owned, it received funding from various white investors in its early days. The biggest investor was Hugh Hefner, the founder of the Playboy brand. He had been influential in the civil rights movement, such as Playboy publishing work from Dr. King and Alex Haley, but his affiliation with Essence would come back to haunt the men. The men sought out stars and rising stars from the journalism world to develop the magazine's identity. They were able to secure the support of the legendary Gordon Parks, the first Black photographer for Life magazine. Parks worked as the magazine's editorial director in its early days, which caused him to feud with the first editor-in-chief, Ruth Ross, who left after Essence's inaugural issue in May 1970. Parks and Jonathan Blount grew a father and son rapport, although their bond was centered around the fact they were both ladies' men. Blount also struck up a friendship with the new editor-in-chief, Ida E. Lewis. Despite Parks' stature in the photography world, he and Essence were accused of alienating Black photographers, and they openly protested the magazine. According to co-founder Ed Lewis, it would take the magazine a decade to repair its relationship with Black photographers. Blount, Parks, and Ida E. Lewis found themselves out of Essence by 1971. Parks decided to pursue other interests, like direct the classic film Shaft, although his name would remain on the masthead to attract advertisers. Lewis was a strong journalist but struggled to meet deadlines, which is a no-go in publishing. She was relieved of her duties, creating instability in the role of editor-in-chief. And Jonathan Blount, the co-founder who sparked the idea of Essence, had become a liability. He was a charmer who was installed as the president of the publication and served as the spokesman, but he was disruptive to the workplace. In a bitter vote, the other three founders ousted him as a partner, although he was allowed to keep his 45,000 shares. Essence finally found its footing when Marsha Ann Gillespie was hired as editor-in-chief. Her monthly column, Getting Down, reflected the emerging socio-political ideology of Black American women and became a staple in the magazine. Circulation reached historic levels, and Black America and advertisers alike saw that Essence was a force to be reckoned with. With the new success, old foes came around. Jonathan Blount and Ida E. Lewis called a press conference and alleged they were fired from the company because Playboy was planning to take over Essence. Although the sale never happened, Ed Lewis said the rumors Essence was a front for a white-owned operation would plague the publication for decades to come. Playboy later sold its shares to Pioneer Capital, who then sold their shares to Camille Cosby, wife of Bill Cosby, in 1986. She would join the board of directors and become a key player in Essence operations. Now back to the 1970s. Once Essence was turning a profit, rumors spread that co-founder Cecil Hollingsworth was pursuing other ventures. The four partners had agreed that they would let each other know about outside business projects, especially if the success of Essence was used as a bargaining chip for said project. Hollingsworth denied Essence provided him personal business leverage and refused to disclose his financials to his partners. The remaining founders, Ed Lewis and Clarence Smith, were dissatisfied with his answer, and Hollingsworth was ousted in 1974. Like Blount, he was allowed to keep his 45,000 shares. From there, all business related to Essence was placed in a holding company called Essence Ventures. But old foes joined forces again. Cecil Hollingsworth, Jonathan Blount, and Gordon Parks attempted a coup in 1977. All three men still held shares in the corporation and managed to convince Blount's ex-brother-in-law to buy enough shares to secure a seat on the board of directors. They pled with Clarence Smith to join their mission and cut ties with Ed Lewis once and for all. Smith quickly decided to remain loyal to Lewis. Although the failed coup would result in 2 years of litigation, Smith and Lewis were solidified as the force that would see Essence through its most successful era. By 1980, Marsha Ann Gillespie was ready to move on as editor-in-chief. She was allowed to hire her replacement, Daryl Royster Alexander, who would be fired the next year due to a lack of editorial identity and a drop in the magazine's circulation. With the seat for editor-in-chief open again, the magazine's longtime fashion and beauty editor, Susan L. Taylor, lobbied for the job. Taylor is not of Black American heritage, as her parents are from the Caribbean. But when she heard Essence was launching in 1970, she sought a job under Ida E. Lewis's tenure as editor. Taylor did not qualify for the job on the surface, as she lacked a college degree and journalism experience. When Ida E. Lewis was asked to explain by ownership why she hired Taylor, she said, "I just like her." Clarence Smith, on the other hand, was unconvinced Taylor was the right hire, feeling she was weak as a fashion editor. Ed Lewis weighed her hard skills versus soft skills. Despite her short resume, he felt Taylor's intangibles were off the charts. She managed the office well, spoke well, presented well, and had an uncanny ability to recognize the issues most important to women. He decided to build a strong editorial team under her to compensate for her lack of hard skills. The plan was to return Essence to the strength of the Marsha Ann Gillespie days. Taylor found that somewhat daunting, namely because she comes from a different cultural background. Taylor said, Marsha Ann Gillespie was brilliant, as were her editorials. She wrote about politics and women's issues. I said there's no way, as a fashion and beauty editor, I could step in and write as brilliantly as she did. Taylor was educated in the tradition of her father, saying, quote, I didn't feel confident in my writing, though I spoke well. I am from a Caribbean family that was part of the British system in Trinidad and St. Kitts, where my dad was from. You are taught to write well and speak well, but I felt I couldn't write. Gillespie happily mentored Taylor, telling her to write in her actual voice and concerning the issues most important to her. Rather than a socio-political lean, Taylor decided to give readers insight into her spiritual journey, aptly naming her column In the Spirit. Once she was hired as editor-in-chief in 1981, Lewis remembered, quote, Susan's first request when she became editor-in-chief was that I give her a budget to do focus groups with Black women to gauge what articles they wanted to see in the magazine. I told her the money would be better spent if she traveled the country herself, getting to know readers firsthand in the vastly different geographical regions that make up America. Although Taylor is not from our lineage, she locked into Essence's mission and really appreciated the calling of the magazine. She is a testament that supporting a Black American vision can be beneficial to all involved. Lewis recalled, quote, Susan was no less inspiring back at the office. Though her workload would increase significantly over the years as she became more in demand as a public speaker, went back to school for a college degree, and entered into a second marriage, the magazine was always her first priority. She approved every idea, read every manuscript, conducted every meeting from layouts to production to cover lines, wrote all of her own In the Spirit columns, and brought more story ideas to the table than any of her other staff editors, often based on ideas she received from Essence readers she met during her travels. Just when Essence felt like smooth sailing, an unlikely adversary arose. John H. Johnson, the founder of Johnson Publishing Company, enjoyed uninterrupted years as the wealthiest Black man in America. He published Ebony and Jet magazines and supported his wife in producing Fashion Fair Cosmetics and the Ebony Fashion Fair, a traveling fashion show. Johnson was old enough to be the father of Clarence Smith and Ed Lewis, but he gave them a lukewarm embrace. When Essence launched, he allowed them to put subscription cards in Ebony, the first time he'd done so for a publication other than his own. The publishers were not in true competition because Johnson Publishing spoke to the general interests of the Black experience, while Essence hyper-focused on Black women. Still, Lewis recalled Johnson's resistance, saying, although I knew the value of partnering, John did not, due to his early experience as the lone pioneer in publishing. This is why I could never get him to consider joining forces with Essence to do things like joint direct mail campaigns or buy printing paper together. These were the kind of shared activities that would have saved money for both companies and enhanced our overall efficiency. Ed, I just can't do that, John would tell me. Then he would say, Madison Avenue will not allow Ebony and Essence to come together. John felt racism was so powerful that advertisers would never support two Black magazines joining forces to share certain expenses. I never believed that. There is always more power in partnering. As the growing success of Essence, a magazine started with 4 partners, clearly showed by the early 1980s, end quote. Johnson had other plans. He quietly began buying Essence stock and asking Essence employees if he could buy their stock too. It dawned on Lewis that Johnson was planning a hostile takeover of the company. In response, Lewis began buying stock from Essence employees too, and made sure to secure the support of board of directors members, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and businessman J. Bruce Llewellyn. Clarence Smith did not make an aggressive push to purchase as many shares, a decision that would come back to bite him years later. When it became clear the hostile takeover was a dud, Johnson called Lewis saying, Ed, you won fair and square. I'm not going to come to your board meetings or your shareholder meetings. All I ask is that you send me financial statements, and every once in a while, you pay dividends. That's what I expect. As Essence neared its 25th anniversary, Ed Lewis wanted a grand affair, but not the typical gala. He brainstormed ideas with his friend George Wein, who suggested a music festival in New Orleans. Wein was a renowned music promoter and co-founder of the legendary Newport Jazz Festival. Once Lewis took to the idea, he trusted Wein to work out the logistics. The bigger obstacle was selling Clarence Thomas and Susan Taylor on the festival. They were doubtful a crowd would pack out New Orleans for 3 days in July. Instead, Lewis and the magazine's marketing director, Karen Thomas, a Black American from Newark, New Jersey, developed the culture component of the Essence Music Festival. In fact, it was Thomas's idea to add panels to the festival to incentivize people to attend. The inaugural Essence Music Festival, held July 1st through 3rd, 1995, was intended to be a one-off affair and was a surprising success. Lewis sensed the momentum and began looking towards the next year, but he nearly canceled when Louisiana changed its affirmative action laws. Lewis said, "The next year, the new Louisiana governor, Mike Foster, made a decision to eliminate affirmative action programs in Louisiana. I'd been a big supporter of affirmative action, so I made a decision that the Essence Festival was not going to come back to New Orleans. Lieutenant Governor Kathleen Blanco asked me if I would be open to meeting with Governor Foster. I persuaded Hugh Price of the National Urban League, who were also having their gala in New Orleans, to go with me to meet the governor. We got Foster to modify his edict regarding affirmative action. The principle was important, but I lost more than $1 million that next year on the festival. The way we publicized the festival was through the magazine. We were late getting materials out. Word was circulating that we may not do it. Sponsors were nervous. A lot of people didn't come because there was uncertainty about whether it would happen or not." Lewis recalled the fallout, saying, "My hardline move in threatening to cancel the second festival if Governor Foster didn't stand down on his affirmative action position made George Wein too uncomfortable. He was a music promoter," he said, "not a political activist. Fortunately, Essence could afford to be both." End quote. This was the fortitude that made Essence trusted by generations of Black Americans. The integrity paid off as the Essence Music Festival turned a huge profit every year since. Now at the turn of the millennium, Essence Ventures was focused on the future. Lewis inquired about buying Vibe magazine, a partnership between music titan Quincy Jones and Time Inc. During a meeting with Time Inc. about the acquisition, the prospect was flipped on him. Time Inc. wanted a stake in Essence. Lewis was shocked but receptive to the idea under one condition: Essence Ventures would maintain majority Black ownership. Lewis felt Black supporters would become frantic about the idea of Essence being white-owned. The deal for Time Inc. to acquire 49% of Essence Ventures was signed in October 2000 to the dismay of many, including his partner, Clarence Smith. The backlash was immediate, and many questioned what would make Essence do such a thing. For Ed Lewis, several factors came into play. He, Clarence Smith, and Susan Taylor had become a toxic triangulation. Taylor felt underappreciated in her role, especially compared to how her white peers were compensated. She demanded a hefty raise, which would increase in increments over the course of several years. She also demanded the company purchase her a $2 to $3 million apartment. This was all while she desired to transition from day-to-day duties as editor to a more executive position. Lewis resented that Taylor was synonymous with the Essence brand. Many people were under the impression she founded and owned the magazine, and Lewis felt she made no efforts to dispel it. She secured book deals and speaking engagements using the Essence name, and Lewis felt she violated the duty of good faith and fair dealing by not giving the company a cut of her profits, although he stopped short of suing her. Smith had proven to be a liability for the brand. His legacy at Essence was marred by accusations of him making unwanted advances towards female employees. Lewis and Essence's legal counsel were constantly bracing for litigation over his alleged behavior. Smith was also reportedly battling alcoholism, making him unpredictable. He began to pursue other endeavors, such as a record label and supporting his son's boxing career. To make matters worse, Taylor and Smith frequently had vicious verbal matches, with Lewis acting as the referee. As far back as the 1980s, Lewis began seeing a psychiatrist to deal with his anxiety regarding Smith and Taylor, along with coping with personal issues. He also underwent open heart surgery before his 50th birthday. He was often considered the passive personality in the Essence machine, an image he wanted to evolve. Lewis possessed an all-or-nothing leadership style and was ready to step back from the hectic world of publishing. After the first acquisition, Time Inc. assigned Michelle Ebanks to Essence, and she later became an executive in Essence Ventures. It has been speculated she was brought in to socialize the Black community into accepting the Time Inc. sale, in hopes that her building a rapport with Essence readers would disarm them about the sale. Earl Graves of Black Enterprise chastised the sale, saying that the soul of Essence was at stake. Lewis was hurt by being perceived as a sellout, saying, "I wasn't worried about the soul of Essence. I was worried about its staying power. I wanted to ensure the longevity of Essence Communications as an institution serving the needs of Black women that would preserve its soul." In preparation of selling the remaining 51%, Lewis needed to move Clarence Smith out of the way. Smith continued to protest the sale, but Lewis held more shares, going back to his battle with John H. Johnson. Before he was ousted, Smith demanded a severance package of $40 million. In 2002, Smith's contract was bought out for $14 million. The full sale to Time Inc. was completed in March 2005, and the outcry was immediate. Lewis was the last man standing from the Essence partnership, and people wanted answers. His public answer was he wanted Essence to remain viable. The internet brought unpredictability to the publishing industry, and Time Inc. had access to customer analytics that Essence did not. He believed Essence had proven Black women were a desirable consumer block, and that would be enough for Time Inc. to protect the Essence brand. While I respect Lewis's answer, I think Lewis was ready to retire and cash out while the print magazine industry still had some worth. And being that he is a man born in 1940, I am shocked he was so convinced a mainstream corporate entity would nurture a Black heritage brand. Still, it is his right to retire as he sees fit, and although Essence means so much to so many as a singular brand, it is Lewis's life to live. This is a constant quagmire for Black business owners. I am curious to know if a similar purchase could have been done with Black American publishers, rather than Lewis selling directly to Time Inc. While it is not clear what Lewis was paid by Time Inc., he certainly received a generous payout as the last remaining partner and a shareholder. Of the shareholders, John H. Johnson received the largest payout at $38 million. Jonathan Blount held the fewest shares, receiving $205,000. Recently, Black Americans have been accused of being more resistant to Essence's African ownership than they were during the Time Inc. ownership, but that's not true. When Michael Bullerdick, a white male, was hired as managing editor, readers voiced concerns. Then Editor-in-Chief Constance White quelled the pushback by saying he worked with the office operations and would have no editorial control. Granted, Essence has had white employees since its inception. The magazine's first executive editor, Barbara Kerr, was white. Bullerdick did not last long at Essence, as his Facebook page revealed adversarial political views. Perhaps the biggest outcry was when the magazine hired Eliana Plakis, a white fashion editor. In a protest led by self-styled image activist Michaela Angela Davis, a media campaign explained to the public that black fashion editors felt this hire deprived them of already limited opportunities. Jada Pinkett Smith stirred the pot when she took to social media suggesting to black women that they should become comfortable with white women appearing on the cover of Essence if they want more representation in predominantly white magazines. Essence also began putting men like Reggie Bush and The Rock on the cover, neither of whom were known to date black women. Readers began to feel Essence was out of touch with the everyday black woman. In 2018, Time Inc. was sold to the Meredith Corporation, which had no interest in retaining Essence. According to the New York Times, Richelieu Dennis, founder of Shea Moisture, reached out to Times Inc. and offered to buy Essence. So for the record, when people ask, well, if black Americans wanted it, why didn't they buy it? It was a private sale and Richelieu Dennis was selected. So who was Richelieu Dennis before the Essence purchase? He is an immigrant from the West African country of Liberia who began selling body care products on the streets of New York City alongside his mother and one of his close friends after they immigrated to the United States. An early iteration of this line was called Nubian Heritage. According to a profile from the New York Times, Dennis and his close friend Naima Tubman heard through a third party that the National Black Theater was in search of a possible financial partner to save its building. The National Black Theater was founded by Barbara Tier, a black American woman, in Harlem in 1968. According to the New York Times, the theater was created to showcase productions by and about black Americans at a time when such stories rarely appeared on the mainstream stage. Dennis and Tubman enticed Tier with an idea to add an eatery, spa, and boutique where Nubian heritage products would be sold, with plans to reach a global audience. According to the article, under the original terms of the partnership, the businessmen agreed to manage the theater building and its half-dozen tenants. They would take 2/3 of any profit. They would pay rent for their own space, and they would pay the mortgage from their assets, not from the building's operating income, end quote. The partnership quickly collapsed. Tier and her children alleged Dennis and Tubman never shared any profits and took out millions of dollars in loans meant to renovate the building. However, instead of the renovations moving forward, Tier and her children claimed the loan went towards funding Dennis and Tubman's personal business ventures. They also alleged the money paid off 2 accounts that were not connected to the theater. As a result, the building fell into foreclosure. To be clear, these are all allegations, and Dennis and Tubman were never convicted of any crimes related to these claims. Dennis and Tubman were removed from the partnership, and Tier passed away before the matter was settled. Tier's daughter said her mother was hesitant to make the claims public in her lifetime because the men had become, quote, Harlem's darlings. Dennis denied any wrongdoing, saying, "My whole life has been about building community, building business in our community, empowering people in our community." Fortunately, Tier's children were able to save the building. But this set a pattern we would see come up again around Richelieu Dennis. He associates with a Black American heritage brand and then seeks to globalize it in the name of community empowerment. But during the expansion, he alienates the core base and people fear retaliation from his PR machine. Prior to purchasing Essence, he sold Sundial Brands, the parent company of his personal care line, Shea Moisture, to British conglomerate Unilever. In June 2020, a Medium post from an author known as Black Female Anonymous exposed the Dennis regime at Essence. The unnamed source accused Dennis, his relatives, and members of his executive team of fostering a toxic work environment. There were also allegations Dennis made unwanted advances towards female employees and retaliated if they declined. The Post said, "For past and present Black female talent once lucky enough to walk its prestigious halls, Essence is the most deceptive Black media company in America." Why? Essence aggressively monetizes Black girl magic, but the company does not internally practice Black girl magic. The company's long-standing pattern of gross mistreatment of its Black female employees is the biggest open secret in the media business. It went on to say, quote, "Essence's C-suite leadership team strategically tells the market it serves Black women deeply under the safe seal of 100% Black ownership, but for the Black women who make up over 80% of the company's workforce, they are systemically suppressed by pay inequity, SH, corporate bullying, intimidation, colorism, and classism." The Post also alleged Richelieu Dennis's wife Martha was over the Human Resources Department, creating a conflict of interest. Dennis and the executive suite at Essence swiftly denied the claims, but he stepped down as CEO of the company, selecting Kenyan immigrant Caroline Wanga in his place. Multiple law firms hired by Essence performed a review and determined the claims could not be substantiated. Dennis claimed he struggled with understanding intellectually the concerns around Essence being committed to centering Black American culture. So we are going to break down the many reasons a lot of Black Americans have pulled away from the brand. Essence continues to face allegations of being a toxic workplace and losing its emphasis on journalism. More of the public began to ring the alarm when Essence issued a cease and desist to the Black-owned Baldwin & Company bookstore in New Orleans during the 2023 Essence Festival of Culture. The city of New Orleans allows a clean zone ordinance to take effect during large events like Essence Fest or the Super Bowl that restricts other outdoor events or festivals from occurring within a wide radius. Baldwin & Company bookstore was hosting a literary event indoors for Black authors during the weekend of Essence Fest. Essence deemed that Baldwin's advertisement used Essence-branded materials and sought to shut down the event, sparking immediate backlash. The bookstore's owner, DJ Johnson, said, "It is deeply ironic that Essence, which claims to celebrate and uplift the Black community, would choose to target a business like Baldwin & Company, which aligns with the values of community service and empowerment. Such actions are not only unjust, but also tarnish the reputation of Essence and raise questions about its commitment to supporting the Black community as a whole." The New Orleans City Council was swift to defend Johnson, saying that the ordinance was designed to stop vendors from selling items on the sidewalks near buildings where Essence is hosting events, not restrict local business owners from having their own events. Then City Council President John Paul Morrell said, "It is completely inappropriate for any large-scale event visiting the city of New Orleans to negatively impact our local businesses with something akin to a non-compete clause. It's especially concerning that the council event was organized by a Black-owned business and would have showcased Black female authors on a weekend that is supposed to be dedicated to Black culture." Essence was considered so aggressive in enforcing the Clean Zone Ordinance that the City Council later passed an amendment clarifying that only the city has a right to shut down an event if it is found to be in violation. Black businesses have been outspoken about how they suffered during Essence Festival despite it generating, on average, $300 million for the city of New Orleans. According to Capital B News, one of the most prominent businesses, Vion's Restaurant, said the partnership doesn't work in locals' favor. Last year, the restaurant saw a $25,000 loss during the festival because the festival would not allow the restaurant to sell food in both the festival and outside events at the same time. The owner, Vion Lewis, also told verite news, we are already disenfranchised. We don't need this extra pressure during this time of the year when we should be able to take advantage of some of what's coming in. Essence Fest sidestepped the large sector of the Black community that is actively boycotting Target and retained the company as the top sponsor for this year's festival. Essence cited being in a multi-year contract with the company, but if Essence truly wants to be seen as a source of leadership in the Black community, it should have at least facilitated a conversation between the public and the executives at Target. Remember, Essence Fest under Ed Lewis, was once willing to walk away from money because of a similar issue with affirmative action. Instead, Essence joined forces with locals and had the measures rolled back. The Essence Fest might have lost money its second year, but gaining its integrity led to it being a huge moneymaker in subsequent years. For the 2025 Essence Festival of Culture, the state of Louisiana declined to give the festival the $2 million it had in the past. If Essence did not alienate so many of the people of New Orleans and Black Americans in general, perhaps pressure could have been applied to the state to continue to give the money. Dennis Richelieu and Essence Chief Events Officer Michael Barclay II cited rollbacks in DEI as causing a drop in funding and sponsorships. But let's look deeper. Apparently, Essence's CEO, Carolina Wonga, has been on leave from the company for about a year, but Essence continues to dance around the situation. Now, I do not know what Ms. Wonga might have going on in her personal life, so I do not want to seem insensitive. However, business is business. Could it be? Essence is struggling with sponsorship dollars because its organization is openly dysfunctional. Publications like Business Insider have written about how Essence tends to hire based on nepotism and not qualifications. Seriously, how many corporations or state legislatures want to invest into a company that won't address its issues? Black Americans being able to trust Essence is deeper than the activities or performers at the Essence Festival of Culture. When Richelieu Dennis bought the brand, he knew its supporters were hoping it would return to its glory prior to Time Inc. So far, he has not delivered. Black Americans were consistent in critiquing the brand when it was owned by Time Inc., and its current ownership should be held accountable as well. In Black American culture, our media outlets have been used as civil rights leverage, such as when Ebony magazine printed pictures of Emmett Till or covered the Montgomery bus boycott, and a charge of how we want to love each other as a community. Those values are not currently reflected at Essence. Essence is going to have to decide if it wants to be a voice of leadership for Black Americans or just siphon its legacy audience to push consumerism. Dennis has mentioned that other people had given up on Essence as a magazine or that no other Black-run festival is comparable to the Essence Festival of Culture, but he should not assume he has a captive audience. The feeling of scarcity in the media landscape is not enough to overlook the alleged lack of ethics stifling the brand. When it is all said and done, he felt Essence was still worth buying because of the cultural cachet Black Americans had poured into it. That leads back to a specific issue we as Black Americans need to address. Yes, Ed Lewis as an individual had a right to make a business decision. But when he said he sold to Time Inc. to save Essence, that didn't happen. The publication is still around and the festival still generates buzz, but the brand is a shell of itself. So no, he did not save Essence. He claims he did not sell out and rather was selling in, but he sold into something that does not understand fostering the foundation of the brand, which is Black American culture. And the Richelieu Dennis acquisition has shown that someone identifying as Black does not mean they will take the necessary care either. Thank you for joining us. please subscribe, like, comment, and share. And be sure to sign up for our Substack at blackamericana.substack.com, where we send out a weekly newsletter so you can stay in the loop on all things Black American culture. See you soon.